and we've done a series of studies, and what we've been fortunate enough to get is this federal department grant, which is the IES stands for the Institute of Educational Studies. They give out grants, and their grants are research grants, and we've got a Goal 3 grant, and it's the only Goal 3 grant that's been awarded so far, in its, the period of time we've been doing them, for the K6 science area. So we're very excited. The grant's about, and I'll go into a little more detail, but it's about a $4.85 million 4-year research grant. It's not chump change. It's quite something. But what's different to this grant, and I want to have a talk in 3 parts so we can have a conversation, and I'll describe what the SWH, the science writing heuristic, is, and then talk about the grant, and then give you some results we've got so far. What's different about this grant is compared to most of the grants that we tend to get, say, from the state, well, or from NSF, the National Science Foundation, is that they tend to be professional development grants. And there hasn't been a lot of data collection going on. This grant's quite opposite to that. This is a grant that has professional PD work involved, but our emphasis is on research. We're trying to look and seeing whether these strategies at this level on a randomised field trial will work, and if they work, well, then the next goal is to go up to a national scale-up project. So this locates Iowa in terms of its importance very highly in terms of the whole system. There's only about 4 or 5 of these awarded nationally, and for us to get one, and particularly in the K6 area, I think it's very exciting. So that's just a basic introduction, but what I'd like to do is give some description of about what is the SWH type project, how can it be used. Then I'd like to give you some details about the grant and what that would mean in terms of schools' involvement as we go around. And then I've got some slides that I can show you some results from the K6 area if we've been doing it. If you want results from the middle school, high school, I can give you those. If you want results from the tertiary sector, I can give you those. We've been doing this across the whole K16 range, so it's not as though we just stay in one area. We're looking at a strategy or approach, that spans the whole gamut of work. So when we have a look at learning, and you guys being in the positions that you are fairly familiar with the notions that learning now is about student-centeredness. We've gone away from these notions of monkey see, monkey do. The old Pavlovian sorts of responses to be much more cognitive in what we're doing. However, one of the problems we have is that I don't think there's a great alignment between learning theory and how we teach in classrooms. I think there's a mismatch there in what's been going on. You're welcome to add into a debate if you'd like to. I don't mind debate, and please jump in. But when we have a look at learning and we talk about in terms of cognition, we have to understand that we all construct knowledge for ourselves. And I think that's really important, and I can give you some examples in a minute if you like about that, why I think it's important. But it is done by individuals, and there's always this movement between prior knowledge. We always bring something into a situation, and we build on what we have, and that's how we construct some knowledge moving forward. So it's about recognising what we bring in, and then how do we build on the work that we want to get. Importantly, there's always this public-private notion. How much opportunity do we give our kids to talk? Let's just say I don't think it's anywhere near as much, because we're all important, and we've got important things to say to our kids, and we don't always give them opportunities to talk. I think if you look at a profession, teaching is one where we do a lot of talking and not as much listening as we ought to do. So in terms of negotiation, we need to have a think that it's both a public and a private forum. And the last one that we're starting to move in as we go in terms of research is that not all work, not all ideas are going to be represented just by text. So kids are constantly engaged with all sorts of modal representations. Pictures, graphs, equations, symbols, and text, just to name a few. And we need to take that into consideration. So one of the things that we have a look at when we start to do this, maybe not so much in the K6 environment, but when you go to the 8-12 and K6 in the tertiary sector, their teachers are science and not language, okay? What have I got to do to teach? You know, why am I worried about language? But the response I always ask people is, I want you to go, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to go and teach a lesson, a science lesson, and I want you to remove all forms of language. Text, graphical, pictorial, mathematical, symbolic. Remove all forms of language. Now go and teach a lesson. Can't do it. So they can't even talk because we've got text. It's verbal text. So the concept of language being important is automatic. It is important. And this is where we need to go to when we start to play around with work, is that we have to see people that when we look at, particularly in the K6 environment where we're getting squeezed pressure from NCLB in terms of language and mathematics, that we can do a lot of our language work in our science lessons. And that's where we try to emphasise it. One of the other critical elements that we have in terms of science is that science is a discipline that's based on argumentation. It's an argument forum. Science advances knowledge by having argument. And I've had this discussion over in Taiwan, and I kept saying to them, because obviously in Asian cultures they don't tend to argue so much, and I keep saying, but how come every time we see your parliament, we see them beating the crap out of each other? And it's not always goes over very well because they're very polite in terms of their humour. But the notion is that we argue. Science is about argument, where we have to have debate. We have to come to some consensus. Ideas are shared and debated, and that's how we move science knowledge forward. How much of that happens in classrooms? Doesn't. Not very much. So when we start to have a look at things, we have to look at, first of all, what is argument? And for us, when we look at it, it's the central idea about science. Science is not about science knowledge per se. The end result of any argument is the production of science knowledge, but argument is central to it. And again, going back to this public and private domain, so we need to have opportunity. Scientists will debate with themselves, but they also have to defend their ideas in the public forum. And so when we look at how science is practiced, it's public and private. And if we look at the structure of argument, folks, don't copy stuff down if you want. I can leave that. It's on Kim's pad. It's on her computer. She can email it to you all if you like. Don't spend time copying stuff down if you don't. That's no. If we look at the structure of argument, it's about questions, posing questions, making claims, producing evidence, and testing those ideas. Well, why aren't those things in classrooms? If that's what science is about, the question goes, why aren't they in classrooms? And the important part about science here the part I want to point out is, in the science education community, we have some people, like every community, you have people sort of right of centre and some left of centre. But a lot of people, in terms of science, we always have to test against nature. Science is not made up knowledge. It's not about what you think, and I don't have to test against anything. We always have to test ideas against nature. Is that what we see happening in the world? And so when we look at argument, that's the final criteria. So how do we link teaching of science to the learning of science? And I think this becomes important. When we look at, let me be a touch controversial here, and I've got a couple of curriculum coordinators, principals, superintendents. Okay, how many of you had the AEA language people come in and tell you kids have to learn the vocab list before they can start talking? Has that changed, has it? It used to be. Okay. How many people say that kids have to learn how to the structure of the genre before they can use it? Yeah, because they don't know how to use it. We've got to teach them how to use it before we let them use it.